Welcome to EDO Breakthrough, the podcast where we tackle economic development challenges head on. From small towns to bustling cities, every place has its own hurdles to overcome. The EDO Breakthrough podcast creates an environment of collaboration, innovation, and understanding where we can share our real-life challenges and brainstorm solutions. I'm your host, Sandy Dubé, a certified economic developer and founder of PPR Strategies. Each week, we'll be welcoming a different, brilliant, place-based mind to talk through real-life economic development challenges that have been shared with us by you, our gracious listeners. Today, I get to talk with my good friend, Andy Donahue. Andy, can you tell our listeners your current role and what you're doing?
Sure, and it's great to be with you, Sandy, the legendary Sandy Dubé. So, Andy Donahue, I am the state director with the Minnesota Small Business Development Center. We are hosted by the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. So I oversee and help assist and run the administration with the Minnesota Small Business Development Center that has 9 regional centers throughout the state, with 35 additional satellite locations helping entrepreneurs, thrive, start their business, grow their business, really look into that whole gamut of entrepreneurship.
So I don't think you and I would be able to have an authentic conversation without going back in time for a minute. I think we should share with our listeners how we first met. We don't need to go into the details or the F-bombs that I dropped, but would you like to share the story of our first meeting, Andy?
Absolutely. So I think it was 7 years ago. I think that's about 7-year anniversary. It was over the summer. You were teaching the basic economic development course in Maryland, and I was a participant. But the funny story was I wasn't a participant till about 2 weeks prior. I was supposed to take the basic course in Duluth, Minnesota, which was literally 10 minutes from my home. And at the last minute, just because of attendance, it got canceled. And I'm like, what do I do? So looking to see, okay, is there the most recent course, or where is it going to be? And the one that we found was in Baltimore, Maryland. So fast forward a couple of weeks, and I meet this awesome instructor that's running it named Sandy Dubé, and the rest is history. So, came to Maryland and to Baltimore for the week and met a wonderful group of peers, and that we both love to call friends now. And then obviously, our partnership and relationship of how we've got to know each other and work together through the economic development world, sharing stories, best practices, and, fast forward 7 years, now we're doing this little podcast.
Yes. As you know, I think, and many of the people who have taken the Chesapeake Basic Economic Development course with me know it's one of my favorite activities all year long. I love being, when we were in person, and in the last several years, through the pandemic and beyond, we've been virtual, and I still love it. I get to connect with all these awesome economic developers from around the country. This year we had people from, Bermuda and Canada. So we are truly international in all of its form. And we've had people calling in, participating from Germany in the past, and it's been really great. But yes, meeting you and that particular group of friends in that course was certainly brings a smile to my face every time I think about it.
And it's kind of funny how, it's really come full circle now, where the course is actually back in Duluth this summer. Actually in a few weeks, in this fall, and I'm going to be teaching the small business and entrepreneurship section of it. So it's kind of coming full circle, from 7 years ago when I was a participant, with you, and then now teaching part of the class. So it's going to be fun and interesting.
That's awesome. And neither one of us were certified economic developers at the time. And you passed first. I will let the record show there that you passed first. You took the exam first. And then I got a little encouragement from you and others to finally dive in and do it myself.
Yeah, I took it and, luckily passed on the first time. But it was right during the pandemic, 2020. It was the first time that IEDC did the certification virtual. So everything that we kind of thought ahead of time about preparing to do it in person and just all the prep was thrown out the window, just like everything else that was happening in the world at that time, where you basically kicked everybody out of the house and you sat at your office or your kitchen table for, set a number of hours, and trying to do this virtual test that you're just trying to pray that you pass the first time or second time, whatever it might be. So it was a different experience, but so happy that, I was able to pass it, get that certification, encourage you and others to take it, because it is certainly valuable in how you can speak some of that economic development language with other individuals and really talk the talk and understand what they're actually talking about.
Yeah, I used to say, and I was up until 2023, I would say that was my biggest career regret, was not sitting for the exam, not going through that process. And I finally had some friends and colleagues call me out on it and said, "Hey, Sandy, it's not too late. You're not dead. You could do this." So I leaned in and studied for pretty significantly for about 6 months. I brought in an accountability group, other peers that were studying at the same time. And yeah, the two of us that finally sat for the exam, we both passed on the first try, which was pretty awesome. But it's been fun to encourage. And I know when you passed, I think I tried to take credit for your passing because you took the basic course with
Well,
me.
why not? Of
Yeah.
course, you have to.
Anyway, I'd love to shift a little bit. And, with this EDO Breakthrough podcast, we get calls from and emails and things like that from our listeners that have some questions. And, I'd love to hear a little bit about this, your relationship with higher education, the SBDC, and economic development. Tell us about that nuanced partnership.
Yeah. So, with the small business development centers nationwide, so there's 63 networks, across the nation under the Small Business Administration. And normally they are tied to higher education. So, my previous role was a center director in Superior, Wisconsin at the University of Wisconsin Superior. It was tied to the higher ed, the University of Wisconsin system. And then when I came to this new role as a state director for the Minnesota SBDC, it kind of shifted, the whole narrative, because Minnesota is one of 7 networks nationwide that are grandfathered in under a state entity. So we're one of those, institutions that it's operated totally different now because it is state government still. So the shifting with that's a little bit different, but there is still such a need of collaboration between higher education, economic development, and the SBDCs because of the partnership that there's out there with students and how they're getting ingrained in entrepreneurship now, how, they help develop into that workforce, and really the partnerships that exist between, different aspects of the whole entrepreneurship spectrum when you look at entrepreneurship-led economic development. So it's really a differentiation, and neither one of them, there's no great pros and cons. It can certainly be done under, a state government agency or an education institution, because I think both entities have the focus of how do we work with individuals to get them, going off the ground from a business perspective, but then also how do we help them thrive? And I tell this to not only my staff, but the regions that I work with is let's play nice in the sandbox together. And how do we develop these partnerships to really help these ecosystems thrive? And that's a lot of the work that we do, is developing these great plans, hopefully good plans of action to really thrive our local communities and really build these regional clusters that can help, local communities thrive, especially in the post-pandemic world.
That's awesome. So it's interesting at the state level, and I'm curious to dive in a little bit deeper. How much is it? How different is it creating this ecosystem, this environment versus that just focused kind of one-on-one consulting for small businesses? What's that like?
It's unique because, when you think of government, there's so many different little aspects of it that are tied under the one roof. Within the Department of Employment and Economic Development in the state of Minnesota, we have, our sister organizations that are under our organization. So we have an entity called Launch Minnesota that helps with the tech startups. We have a group under community partnerships. That's the grant making, cycle of it. We have a childcare division that's under that as well that really, assists with childcare. That's such a nuance and economic development driver in communities now that's still being talked about. And then also a small business assistance office, which is really just kind of the answer line, the emails, and how people, start an LLC, tax questions and such. But that's just the little piece of it. And then we get into the bigger aspects of the economic development department we have workforce, we have the trade office, we have another community city division that really looks at community planning. So it really ties into a lot of mechanisms that are tied to economic development that you necessarily wouldn't get in that higher education atmosphere right away without, creating outside partnerships with other state organizations. So to have everything under one roof makes it a lot more interesting. But also, it's a lot of different players, a lot of different, avenues that you have to go through to develop these partnerships. A lot more individuals that you have to meet.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a bigger beast, and probably greater bureaucracy or something. How are you finding it? How are things kind of managed? How is that handled in Minnesota?
It's a little bit different just because you're working with larger budgets, you're working with the legislature, you're working, directly with your peers that are, advocating, but you want to use a lot of the same dollars, for different programs versus a smaller minimal budget, from when I was at the center level. So it's much bigger, but also gives us an opportunity to really diversify our efforts and look at how do we really change that whole landscape and utilize the dollars, from a taxpayer standpoint, more wise, but also more fruitful for entrepreneurs and communities that are looking to build.
It's interesting. I love the idea, and I want to dive in a little bit deeper. I love regionalism. I love, organizations, communities collaborating. I think that oftentimes from an economic development perspective and a business attraction perspective, they only have enough money to compete with one another, much less to like actually attract and bring in new investment. I'd love to talk it out a little bit from a small business support environment. What does regionalism mean to you and your part of the country?
Mm-hmm. We're, blessed in Minnesota where it's very diverse, we have obviously the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul area, which is the hub of the urban area and the downtown, Twin Cities area where the capital is. But then also there's a lot of growing clusters, where I live right outside Duluth, Rochester, Minnesota, St. Cloud, Moorhead, which shares a border with Fargo, North Dakota. There's a lot of regional clusters that are trying to build up and also stand out. So from my perspective with regionalism, we're in a different environment now where there's a lot more remote, efforts. There's work from home efforts where organizations, communities are really trying to build that community landscape where an individual could live in let's just say a rural community, but they could be also working for a Fortune 500 company in Minneapolis or in Chicago or Dallas, Texas, wherever it might be. So we're in a different environment where you have to build the amenities and really build that entrepreneurship spirit. So items are built up for communities to thrive, for families to live, for individuals to have that opportunity to not only work, but also, play in their backyard and, build their lifestyle within that community itself. So I think we're in definitely a different period of how regionalism works in economic development. And I think it's just starting, just with so much different potential that's out there in different communities as it is.
Yeah, I made some notes. I think that you're right. Those regional clusters and being able to work remote. And then you said Duluth, and that made me think of the coldest place I've ever been in the United States was Duluth, Minnesota, over Thanksgiving. I've never been that cold. That wind off the lake is no joke.
And I remember when you came up that one time to Duluth,
I haven't warmed up since then. I haven't been back. Yeah.
No, you haven't. No, you came on a very cold day, wind off the lake, doing Bentleyville. I remember that tour of lights, and you were frozen from that. And that was just a cool day. That wasn't as cold as it could be. We have experienced colder. But then, but if you look at the tourism aspect of it, then we have a year like the last year where we hardly had any snow. 2 years ago, it was a record-breaking snow. So it's just the way the environment's thriving right now, but also how the economic development driver of tourism plays a big, point in it too. Some people don't come back after cold weather, or some people want to come back because they embrace the cold or embrace the outdoors and such.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I think that in this profession of economic development, it is pretty cool that you could hopefully find a job anywhere you wanted to work and, lean in on whatever that lifestyle was, whether it's a beach in Florida or, right off the coldest lake in the United States in Duluth, Minnesota, whatever that would be, is amazing. And the rural, the urban environments and all of those places, it's interesting.
And technology's changed all that.
Yeah.
Let's just say pre-COVID, pre-2020, majority of people went into the office. Some worked from home, some worked remote a little bit, but didn't have that extreme hybrid, work environment. Now everybody was kind of thrusted into that. Got to be remote, during COVID, and really the hybrid environment took off. So it's given a lot more of that work-life balance, but also for the economic development, perspective, it really gave communities the idea, okay, what do we need to do to help these individuals, come to our communities, want to raise a family in these communities. So, from a regionalism perspective.
How are you, this, I am talent attraction, workforce development, maintaining, students in our communities is something that we, are challenged by our clients. A lot of places are fortunate that we work with are fortunate to have a 4-year institution, and so it's always that magic formula. Once we attract them to come to the town, how are we making them feel a part of the community, letting them know of employment opportunities, and then getting them to stay? And I think every community is a little bit different, but often all face some element of that overarching challenge. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that. When I started my previous role as a center director with the SBDC, one of the things when I was on a workforce committee was thinking about why aren't we getting individuals that are, first year, second year students into those businesses, right away to learn the landscape of not only that company that they might intern for or potentially work for in the future, but let them, explore different areas of workforce in that job itself. They might be going to school for marketing, but they might end up being an accountant or have some sort of, position in finance because they love that area, or vice versa. Or they might think they want to be more in the industrial on the floor supervisor versus, some of the back office operations. So I was certainly a believer. Let's get individuals in those businesses to explore, and I'm seeing that right now with, as my daughter just went to college, is now a freshman for an education degree where she's going to school. They're getting them into the schools and student teach, by their second semester, which allows them to see, do they like this career path or do they want to be switching? So, how it translates then to economic development is if you're able to build that community and build that, infrastructure from not only young individuals going to school into the collegiate aspect, whether it's a 2-year, 4-year, university, going to the trades, whatever it might be, get them to understand that business or that organization. It shows that there's an importance within this community, and we want them to, feel that they have a place here because we care about their education perspective. And then you get them just into the community itself and figure out what do they want to see and have them involved in community planning and, different talent attraction aspects of it where, if you want to stay here, what do you need to be here to, live, have a family or whatever it might be.
I always say that one of the best business attraction techniques is business retention. And it's the same for talent. One of the best talent attraction techniques and tactics is talent retention. You make people feel appreciated and loved and respected and give them the services and the resources, either as an individual or as a business, that they need. You're responsive to their needs, and they will stay and they will tell friends about it. And whether those friends are other Fortune 500 companies or, other mom and pops or their own family. Heck, my parents followed me to college long after the fact. They waited until Tabitha was born, but then they followed. So they really didn't come for me. They came for her. But, you're not going to move somewhere without kind of testing it first as a visitor.
Sure. Yeah. You invest in the people, they're going to invest in you. There's definitely a correlation between that, because if you can invest in them and show them that your commitment, they're going to hopefully have the same commitment to you and, help you as a business owner or whatever it might be thrive in that community itself.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So I'm going to shift a little bit. I'm curious, obviously, Chesapeake Basic Economic Development course one of the IEDC approved basic courses out there in the world. You and I have seen each other at IEDC conferences and all over the country. Talk a little bit about why. Our listeners are always curious on ways of professional development and investment and things like that. Well, how have you found IEDC and your state association to be beneficial for you professionally?
Yeah. So, when I started exploring back in really was 2016, I believe, maybe early 2017, the IEDC, the CCD certification, I wanted something different. There's so many different certifications out there. Individuals could get, a finance certification. There's a NASBI through international trade. But looking at that whole ecosystem within not only the Wisconsin SBDC that I was part of, but also the regional ecosystem itself, what was different, and realized very quickly there was not many individuals in Northwest Wisconsin that had the CECD certification. So I'm like, okay, let's look at this a little bit deeper. And as I read through it, more and more in depth, I'm like, okay, this is really tying into this whole landscape of economic development, no matter if it's, workforce strategy, strategic planning, if you're running your own economic development organization, entrepreneurship, there's all this synergy into economic development and how it's really creating communities and how it's creating that whole vibrant, what happens in your backyard type of style. So when I was, researching it, it just became more and more, insightful that this is an opportunity to really cultivate my own path going forward. And even if I don't work directly with an economic development organization as like an executive director or anything like that, I can speak their language. I can understand where they're coming from. I can build those different partnerships, especially in smaller rural communities that we had in Northwest Wisconsin. And even here in, all throughout Minnesota, it's that big blend of urban and rural. So you're able to understand where economic development organizations are coming from and how they blend into the entrepreneurship world. So that was really what I found captivating and part of the reason why I wanted to go through this whole IDC certification process and then build upon that is because of that partnership aspect and how you could develop and cultivate unique perspectives, but then also talk a lot of their language. And then they can listen from the other perspective of, how entrepreneurship can really work in conjunction with the work that they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's great. I encounter people all the time who can't afford to, it's a big travel, it's a big expense, it's a lot of things. And I always suggest that they start locally at their state level. And obviously, I've been very involved with the Maryland Economic Development Association for many years, and more recently with the Virginia Economic Development Association, and at times West Virginia. I mean, so we get very involved in supporting some of these economic developers that can't afford to, and their communities that can't afford to travel to IEDC. But I think if you can, it is another level of camaraderie and exposure to different topics and ideas that you can bring back to your own community.
Yeah, and it's networking. It's just, it's understanding who's involved, now being part of on the Minnesota side with the Economic Development Association of Minnesota that, works in conjunction with IEDC. A couple of different things. It gives you an opportunity to meet individuals that you've heard of, but you've never been able to put a face yet to their name, or you develop these different partnerships, individuals that you've heard about who they are and what they do, but you've also always have wanted to create some sort of partnership with them or some sort of dialogue. So it gives you just that opportunity to learn some of those best practices that might be going on, but also building those relationships. And then it just allows you to, go into different things, whether it's teaching at their basic course that I'll be doing here in a few weeks, or if it's, joining other, organizations or board of directors or portions that might be a volunteer basis itself. So it helps build up those partnerships and your name with not only your organization, but their organization too.
I love that. I was laughing because last year, I guess at IEDC's annual conference, there was a topic that I wanted to talk about because I felt like it was a conversation that needed to be had. And so I pitched the idea, and then by God, they took it. And so then I had put together a panel and moderate a panel. But as a result, I got to, pick the people that I wanted to be on the panel. And oftentimes those were people that I just, I knew of. I respected what they have done in the community, but they didn't know me from, Eve. So it was an opportunity to connect and meet new people and in turn moderate a fun conversation. So
And I just sat in the back there and raised my hand there and asked you the pointed questions about
oh my God, you totally did. I forget that you are such a good cheerleader for me when I need it. Thank you.
anytime.
Oh my goodness. So, one of the other things that people, question that we get, been getting asked with this podcast is, the idea of career change. And I'm curious, I don't know the answer to this, Andy. What did you do professionally before joining economic development?
Yeah. So many years ago, college, it was working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which, doesn't sound like the best career choice, but, for someone, coming out of college to learn customer service skills, it really gives you a good foundation. And I shouldn't say it's a bad career choice. It was a good organization for a couple of years that I worked for. It gave you some management experience, gave you those interpersonal relationships that you build from, developing new accounts in a sales capacity, but also that customer service level of, working with individuals from a business perspective and consumer perspective. But then I went to work for Wells Fargo for about 7.5 years, throughout a variety of different, departments, personal banking, assistant manager, branch manager, back to the small business world. And that's really where I found my niche in the small business area in entrepreneurship, is working within that group and understanding how entrepreneurship is really starting to thrive and what individuals need from a day-to-day basis. So the funny part of this was when I went to want to work for the university, that Wisconsin SBDC, there was a position open. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to go for this position. Well, they basically had redo the position because the center director was retiring. So then I'm like, well, I guess I'll just apply for that one. And lo and behold, this is how that position, my first exposure to the SBDC happened, and was there for nearly 8 years until this state director position in Minnesota came along. And, I was at the point in my life where this is an opportunity to look at it. It has an opportunity to work hybrid and, remote for the most part. And, where I live about 2.5 hours north of, the Twin Cities area, it was a great opportunity for me to jump right in and see if I could do this one. So almost 10 years now into the SBDC world, I really have to look back and see how the first careers, help shape that, from customer service to banking to understanding how entrepreneurship has started and really thrives into where we're going today.
I did not know any of that. That is great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think I'm one of those few wacky people that actually started in economic development right out of college. And then I transitioned to starting my own company after a couple of years of maybe 8 years of doing that. And then, yes, have been here ever since, but get to work with really cool economic developers, those in workforce development and tourism. It's been fun.
It's all about pivoting to different areas. They really, a lot of things blend together now. They have a lot of shared borders, in that world. So you can change direction fairly quickly, especially with a broad knowledge that you might have, like you did.
Yeah, it's different. Thank you. So before I ask my last question, I'm curious if you had any other thoughts that you wanted to share today.
Oh boy, where do we want to go with thoughts?
Here we go.
It's more of a question for you than Sandy. Where do you think the world of entrepreneurship-led economic development is going now? We've seen a big shift in the traditional way of doing it. And now post-pandemic, we're seeing such a large variety of businesses that are starting, and not only just starting, they're thriving because of, the different markets that are out there. So where do you see things going?
It's interesting because I think we do see things, and I see things in different buckets. But for me, the most interesting, or for me personally, where I see my shift is a little bit more lifestyle entrepreneurship, and this idea of work, live anywhere and grow a team that wants to work, live anywhere. And my team is remote as well. And even those that aren't, that work out of our Maryland office, they're still hybrid. So this idea of work and your passion dictating kind of how you spend and how you recreate but there being a beautiful balance with it. And then I think of, technology companies and those that are leaning in to solve a problem. And how are we doing that? And how are we embracing technology to kind of for the better good? And so I think that, and maybe it's just today, but right this second, no, actually, I know for myself, I have never been like, make billions of dollars and driven by the bottom line. I need it as a means to an end, but it's a greater passion. And I don't think I'm alone in that desire to feed all the mouths that I need to feed in the office, have a good time and surround myself with people that I enjoy and get to support and help other entrepreneurs to live out their passion and goals. So I don't know that I really answered your question, but I think I'm probably more passion driven, and I think that there are entrepreneurs that are probably more passion driven these days than maybe in the past.
And I think it's really every geographical area around the country has a different, unique feel, from that perspective, where you see in every community is different. If it's a smaller rural community, you're going to see a lot more lifestyle brick and mortar locations that can help communities thrive. If you're getting to a bigger metro area, you're going to see a diverse mix of service, brick and mortar, manufacturing and such. So I think there's those that have come from I think like this is a hobby that can really get into that, multi-$1,000, employee company or revenue streams. Or there's the one, like you just mentioned, that feeding the mouse in your business, making sure you're making the money to have, successful family or lifestyle, but yet, enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah, no, the day I stop enjoying this and the day I stop like truly being passionate about this, I'm done. I'm going to step aside, let somebody else do it. But I absolutely love it. I love helping economic developers in that basic course see it and like connect the dots and realize that, oh my gosh, wow, understand my role here, all the way through to helping those, with capacity issues in their organization. They might be a small 1 or 2 person office, where we can come in and help them like really implement a program that they didn't have the capacity to implement before, or those that, have a 10 to 15 person office and they're still pulling their hair out because they can't get it all done because all of these demands on the community and on them as an economic development organization.
And you talked about the Chesapeake, economic development course that we all took. Was just like any business or anything organization, you're laying a foundation. And if you don't have the proper foundation, the structure is not going to be solid for the future. So going back to our previous, a little bit ago, conversation about, the IEDC courses and, looking at the local economic development course, anybody that's interested in economic development that might not know if it's the best fit or if they don't know much about it, take it just because it's going to give you that foundational aspect of understanding and seeing really what's going on in your backyard and how things thrive in that world. Because the majority of people probably don't understand all the inner workings of really what's going on. I didn't at one point. I knew what I knew about entrepreneurship, but I didn't know about all these other little areas that really focus in on the bigger picture.
Yeah, you're right. Invest in yourself so that you can share and invest and ultimately invest in your community. It's 100%. I love it. Okay, so my final question. What has led to your career EDO breakthrough?
Should I just say Sandy DeBay? How awesome she was.
Mic drop. Bam.
What's led to my breakthrough, my EDO breakthrough? I would say number one is really learning, the foundational piece that we just talked about and taking the basic class when you let it. And I'm not just, sucking up on the podcast here or anything like that, but it really gave me a different perspective. And, without part of that, I don't know if I would have got to the point where I'm at, within my career, because it all builds upon each other. I had a colleague when I worked in Wisconsin that told me it's going to take a good 3 years of understanding your role before you feel like you're successful. And now my new role here, I've been in this role within the state for about 15 months. I'm feeling good. I'm understanding things, but I'm not to where I want to be yet. So I think everything really builds upon each other, whether it's, you're working from, 20 some years ago to the foundational pieces that might be laid for you, when you're in your mid 30s or whatever, or whenever you take your CCD, whether it's, at a younger age or if you've been in the industry for 25 years. So I think those are the moments that are that breakthrough where you finally see the aha moment and say, hey, this is what I can do to really catapult and cultivate my career going forward and really make that impact. So one is, laying the foundational pieces that you helped lay, when we went through the basic course. But I think the second aspect of it is something that just continues to be ongoing and seeing success within the communities that you work with. And even though I might not be, boots on the ground working, directly with clients anymore, but I can see what's happening in the communities based on the regions that we work with and how things are just being defined and cultivated, day by day, year by year. So I think from the other part of the breakthrough is it's ongoing because you want to see communities thrive.
Thank you. I know we could sit here and talk for hours and hours, and I appreciate you. Thank you for joining today, Andy.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
The EDO Breakthrough Podcast is brought to you by PPR Strategies. PPR Strategies, standing for People and Places Reimagined, is a strategic consulting firm working specifically with EDOs and other place-based organizations. We share the unique stories of communities through communication, strategic planning, marketing, media relations, and more. Visit us at pprstrategies.com and find our contact information in the show notes. I'd like to give a big thank you to you for listening. Remember, together we are unstoppable.